one of my radio programs of the elevator, I once received a question after the show had just ended. And this person calls and questions me, what exactly must I do in order to change and rewrite my life? It was a question intended at knowing exactly the magic formula of changing life. Precisely, it was also a question that showcased one's interests and intentions to change a life that he or she might be fed up with. I sat down for a moment and my brain scanned all the documentaries and all the information I know about changing life. And I had no good question than to also ask him, what exactly do you want to change from your life? Moments of tense and silence crept in. And it was more of, I'm not very sure, but I just need that one formula for me to change my life. And I told him that in life, you cannot change what you don't know. You first need to know what exactly must be changed. And you cannot know who you are unless you know where you're from. You cannot know the things that you must change unless you recognize and acknowledge some of the things that you must indeed work on to change. And the truth is that, what holds the truth about our future, what holds the truth about how we must change our lives depend on some facts that we need to know. How would you then change something you yet don't know? And ladies and gentlemen, the only formula of we changing and rewriting our destinies depend upon some facts, and some of them are, you cannot know who you are unless you know where you're from. The bitter truth is that most people don't know where they're from. Some who know about where they're from hardly take it as something important. You know what? It is unless you get to know where you're from, that's when life gets to unlock itself. For the society that you dwell in changes everything. And so do your activities also changes depending on the type of the society you are inhabiting. And as someone stated, that show me who you are and the people you hang up with, and I'll tell you who you are. This means that you are directly a product of your society. You are directly a product of the people you hang around with for the next 5 minutes of your life. The truth is, the people we hang around with and the society that surrounds us sets the stage for our life experience, and it makes a fundamental stage for our reasonings that sets our behaviors, and that makes up becoming what influences us and the way we think as well as the way we feel. Meaning that the only way to know how you can change your destiny right now and change your life, it's by knowing the people surrounding you, because that is the bitter truth. This later affects how everything about your life works out, in that someone living in a different society, when he or she shifts to the other society, life becomes different. Take a minute to compare the people living in one particular society and those living in a particular society. You will find that there are a list of difference between these two categories of groups. And that is exactly what it means by starting off to change your life. Welcome to the Elevator Podcast with me, Joshua Oyepa. Ladies and gentlemen, the truth is that there are certain things you are acknowledging and there are certain life you are living simply because you don't know your truth. You don't know your worth. As someone one time stated that you may build your life around what others know about you. You might build your life around what you know about yourself. But you must, and I use the word must, build your life around what you know about yourself. So what is your truth? What is the truth you hold in life? Because the truth is that truth does not become a lie because many are not knowing it. Neither can truth become a lie because the world is standing against it. Because truth will always remain even when it seems to be forgotten. And as we start our today's podcast, allow us get the quote of the day. Our quote shall be taken from an historical statement, and it states that those who knows history can read the future. That is our quote of the day. As we get into today's edition of our Elevator Podcast, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to bring for you a tale of what changed society. I'm going to reveal for you the truth and the secrets of how life started changing from the genesis to the current present. And we shall also together predict what will happen in the later future after your society has been vanished. And as we go through each and every step of the society history, I need you to put yourself and have your mental shoes as you imagine yourself being or living in that society that we are going to be revealing in historical statements. And the first society, ladies and gentlemen, that existed, and I wish you put yourself as someone who was living in that society. The hunting and gathering society. For the Bible scholars, we know of the different stories of people and prophets who are called by God. And as they were called, God had instructed them to move to places unknown, to move to places where they have no relatives neither, and to start living life in a location they never knew. That is exactly an example of how we can get to relate to what this hunting and gathering society means. And some of the characters about this society was that survival depended only on hunting and gathering. A man or a woman gets to gather or hunt animals in order for the family to continue moving and in order for the society to keep having what to survive on. And the other element of such a society was that the task or the type of duty depended only on some specific gender. That a woman, in some societies, women were just meant for gathering fruits and vegetables. and the men were responsible for hunting. And one of the characters of this society was that they believed so much in the shamans, the people who were believed to have spiritual connections and were believed to have influence from spiritual forces. That was also one of the characteristics of such a society. The other element of such a society was that prestige would be accorded differently. But above all, it depended on one's contribution to the society. Just like it is nowadays, the world respects the world boss, the world seek and search for the one with impact. The world will always look forward to the one who is transformational. The world will vote for someone who has the creativity needed or a service they're demanding. And as Mr. Edison one time stated that if a man can set a best trap than the neighbor, even when he lives in the inner forest, the world will always make a trench to reaching him. Meaning that in life, as we carry on with our different activities and become better at it, prestige will be accorded to how you are known, to what you are known of, and to the services you're giving. It will be what will be acting as a reference for who you are. But ladies and gentlemen, the other fact about this society, the hunting and gathering society, was that they had a small population indeed. And those population comprised of about 25 to 40 people living in a particular society, meaning that the larger a society was, the more effort needed and demanded for that society to strive and continue. The other fact about this society was that they only accumulated small possession, and this was meant to be that way. Why? Because most of the things that were hunted were perishable. The fruits and the vegetables gathered could perish. So no one had any motive of gathering and accumulating more than a fellow. The society was equal, and the iniquity was not an issue for them. For no one would strive higher than the other. And how then would you strive more than others, yet what you would accumulate would all be perishing? So this society had a character and an element of not only being nomadics, but also having few possession, and they could not go beyond the population I stated. And when one side of the society they were living in had some challenges or gets drained in what the resources they were needing, they could shift and move to the other location, and so forth. They always continue rotating. That's why they were given the title Hunting and Gathering Society, who were mainly nomadics and acquired small possession. They didn't work much, and they didn't work to store. Neither do they have to work on materials that can be inherited. Life was just so simple. And according to history, it is said that this society was one of the most luxurious society ever, because life was at its peak. And no one used to mind of the future, because the future would mind of itself as they continue living. And when one location fails, they get determined to move to the other location. And ladies and gentlemen, the truth about life is that where we are located in life becomes a determining factor for what happens for us in life. Imagine yourself being in a society like this. I think you would always have a mindset just like they had. Right now, you could have heard the truth and you would be questioning yourself, how dare did they think of even living that way? But the truth is that the society that they were located in became a determining factor for whatever happened to them in life. After that first society existed, many years, about 10,000 years later, a shift happened. And this time round, the shift that came is a reason for why the societies of nowadays behave the way they do. And step by step, let's unveil this historical moment as well. The second society that also existed, that came later after the hunting and gathering society, about 10,000 years later, that society was named as the pastoral and horticultural society. This was a society that had splitted specialization in that the others specified in crop production, while the others specified in animal production. The pastoral society that existed those days were the one who pursued a passion of pasturing animals, and they developed in regions with lower rainfall and unreliable rainfall. So they still remain nomadics, moving from one place to the other, while the others still pursued another passion, and they were dealing with agriculture and cultivation of plants. Because as this society came into existence, some discovered that they can plant what they have gotten, and some also realized that they can still breed the animals they go to hunt. So a society like this came in and emerged as one of the existing societies with the different mindsets. But if I may tell you some of the characters of a society like this, I need you to note that they needed not to abandon an area. When they discovered that we can finally settle and plant, so some started expanding their territories. They started building perimeters, and they started enlarging what they needed and what they had. And from there, a change bumped in. And with the change that bumped in, that touched almost every aspect of life, was the division of labor. For not everyone was now doing the same thing. Not everyone was working at producing the same product, because people were already specialized. And as the division of labor came in, it became a tremendous point of change. It became a turning point in that society that not only its repercussion affected them, but we still feel it up to the next generations, perhaps coming after us. And from the division of labor, some realized that we can start trading. So trade stepped in, for they started even pricing and valuing what they had. It was from such a society that social inequity arose, which made some families to gather more and made some clans to achieve more. Well, the others were just less. So this is where the shift started from. Later, for protecting their gains, some entered into war and fought, where others who needed things by force still stepped in and got what they needed through the different wars they tailed. And from the war that opened doors to slavery, for some people, when they went for wars, and attacked the other clan or territory, they would enslave those who were weak vessels. And when they bring them back to where they were from, those people act as their servant in producing what they needed and at no cost at all. So those captives who were taken were always used for producing and doing other tasks that was demanded. And it was from this moment that individuals started passing their possession to their descendants. And their wealth grew concentrated to an extent that some, for the first time, started becoming chief in order to protect what they had worked for. And some individuals lived so well with the power and the tranquility needed. In a short while, this society continued producing what it had to produce. But if we will realize and note out some of the facts here, I want you to ponder out and compare yourself to being in that society. Let's assume you are right now a leader, because in that society, taking leadership position was something easy. And you took all the leadership because you needed to protect what you had worked for and came. And ladies and gentlemen, did you know that you are also a leader of your own life? Not of the country, not of your family, but of your own life and your own self. The question is, how are you leading yourself today? And did you know that today, life still carries the same pattern? Others are gaining controls over the others, while the others are remaining average. They're remaining mediocres, and they're becoming more or less and less in equity. The question is, who are you right now? Are you growing bigger, or you're also settling for less? And the other fact we need to know is that what we share in common with a society like that existed, it's that it was one's choice to accumulate what he or she needed to accumulate. It was from one's choice that would account for what he or she can leave to be inherited. And accumulation was by choice. The question is, what are you accumulating now in order for you to become the person you want to be? What are you accumulating and working over in order to have the things you need to have? What are some of your daily choices you're having today that will not only elevate you, but also have something to point to and something that can be passed to your descendants? Ladies and gentlemen, one fact we need to know about that society and our current society, and what we somehow share in common, though we never lived together with them in their society, but they set a foundation and a principle and a philosophy of how society needed to work. And basically, it is not now about what your status or your location in life could be as a determining factor. It is not all about what you think you know about who you are. It is not now no longer about some of the factors stopping you from becoming who you want to be, but it is about entirely you. It's not about your government. It is not about your job. It is not about your status. It is not about your location. It is not about the climate and the factors of the weather. It is not about the currency you're having. It is not about your family. It is not about your culture and clan. The fact is that the entire thing of changing life It's about you yourself. It's not all about those factors we have mentioned. For we are a product of our choices, and those choices gives us actions, and those actions ends up becoming our discipline, and that later creates our principles of life. And when it has created our principles of life, it ends up turning to become our purposes of life, and later it ends up becoming who we are, and it ends up giving us the definition of life. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you were a prisoner, then you would be relying only on the command and the wishes of the one taking care of the custody. But because you are not a prisoner of the society you live in, you have a full potential and unstoppable interpretation of getting to know who you are and the fact about you. If you could remember, I earlier stated that the fact can't get lost simply because most people are not knowing it. The value of the fact can't get exaggerated simply because the world is on one side. The fact still remains and stands even when it is almost forgotten, or even when it is already forgotten. What is the truth about yourself? A tale of how everything changed, and it is still the same tale that can help you change what you need in life and can help you transform not only yourself but also the future of the generations coming after you. We are taking a short break. When we get back, we shall pick right from where we stopped to understanding more of the editions. As we continue with our podcast, I kindly request that you get to YouTube and type the Elevator Podcast 256. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more of the contents that you shouldn't miss out, and become part of our committee via the WhatsApp scan logo that is presented on the poster as we continue discovering, unveiling, and also helping you in discovering who exactly is inside you. As we continue with a tale of how society got transformed and how everything changed, allow me welcome you back again as we continue with the remaining aspect of facts that changed the society. Ladies and gentlemen, the other society that came 5,000 to 6,000 years later after the Erotocultural Society and the Pastoral Society was a society that welcomed elements of innovation, and this society was given a name of Agricultural Society. It's from here that innovations of plowing equipments and made people to change their society. It gave opportunities for more to be engaged in the process of productions, and it also helped many to cultivate and dream bigger. They made tremendous changes and achievements in life. They became more than what they were supposed to be, simply because of the innovation that brought the different opportunities and the manpower needed for them to strive even bigger than what they were yet to be. Ladies and gentlemen, the fact about this society is that with the abundance of innovation and with many people being involved, with large acres and miles of land being cultivated, and with machines being innovated in hoping individuals strive even more harder and get to capture bigger portion and make them acquire more possession of life. This society produced something we will term it as a surplus. And in this surplus, as you very well know, that when something is in more quantity, there will always be a need for other process to come in. When a product is produced in bulk, there will be a need of others to add value to what that product is. There will be a need of others to specify in other departments in order for it to continue moving and producing, so that what is produced shouldn't be wasted. That is how exactly the mindset started shifting. And this is where the ushering of some mindset that we still inherit up to now started from. The agricultural society did not only develop what we have mentioned as maybe innovation of plowing, or maybe perhaps the individuals getting involved into different activities. It was not about the surplus only, but it was from this society that people started developing cities and what is now commonly known as culture, which we may define as the language, the belief, the value, the norms, the belief, and the material symbols which characterize a group and pass it to the next generation. They started developing those in that generation or that society. If we may refer, it is something that became the dawn of civilization, because it was from this moment that ideology of civilization started stepping in. And the truth is that different roles and the gender plus the multitasking came in. Because in the earlier societies, others still only specified in one category of thing, and your gender could determine that. But here, with this society, a birth was given to the different roles someone can play. As historian points back to it, it is stated that it was from this generation or this society that the gender, the responsibility, and the multitasking ideology came in. Specifically, a gender that only deserved to work on the other one thing was given more task to attain, and they had to multitask in order for them to complete whatever their ambitions were. And it was from this society that others managed to gain control of the growing surplus, and inequity became the fundamental features of life. And it is from this society that others had the privilege of protecting and expanding what they had. It was from this moment that the elites developed a strategy of power. And in this society, they formulated army men and armed men to protect their privileges and gain. That is exactly what happened, and it is a reason for why society transformed. The other fact is that it was from this society, since others gained positions, since others had the privileges to gain more than what others had, it was from this moment that not only did they set a strategy of protecting what they gained, but it was from also this moment that they looked for more resources of protecting what they're already gaining. Ladies and gentlemen, needless to say that it was from those people that had the power in the society that came up with the ideology of levying tax on the subject or the weaker ones who are living in their society. Don't you see that it is where the transformation of the world changed? Step by step, the world is now controlled by all these principles and fundamentals of life features. But it started some thousands of years ago. It didn't start yesterday. It started eons of time back, and it is still going to be continuing for more eons of time coming ahead. But ladies and gentlemen, for the sake of today's podcast, we are not only revealing secrets, we are also giving you insight of how you can still relate yourself to such a society and become the better people who are living right now, and use that historical fact of interpreting your life as well. Ladies and gentlemen, with a society like this, and concentration of resources came in with the mixture of power and the oppression of the weaker people who are not in power became the forerunner of the community, became the forerunner of empires, and it became the fundamental truth for how a state should be operated. Remember, as we compare ourselves right now to that also society, it is not only an historical truth, but it's also a way we can use that history as a mirror to reflect for us also what life looks like today. As I earlier stated that in this podcast, we shall be discovering step by step on how we can better off, how we can use history to set a pattern of our today, and how we can use today still to draw more patterns of how the future should look like. And if we are to put ourselves into a generation like that, if we are to put our mental shoes into understanding life the way it was those days, for it is stated that history is being read, but it's also being written every moment. As we are into this podcast, we are reflecting the history of the past. But through reflecting those history aspect, we are also using those facts to rewrite another history. As one time someone stated that history is being read, but it's also being written by people with a vision. So do you have the vision to write that history for the next generation coming after you? Do you have something you need to point to for generations to inherit? Remember that those who know their past history can read the future. And if you don't have an agenda of your life, the others who have agenda shall put you in their agenda. Wait a minute. If you don't have an agenda in life, others who have shall always put you in their agenda. With all the innovations that are within reach, with everything and every opportunity the world has provided for us today, from the technological aspect to the different creativities, to the different contents of information that is within reach, the question is, what are you doing about them? Are you using them to get to where you want to be, or you are taking them for granted? That is the key takeaway for this edition. As we get into our second half moment in today's episode, as I always stated, that to know where you want to go, you first have to discover where you're from. And you cannot go far in life. You cannot discover your truth about life. You cannot get to know who you are unless you discover where you're from. And you cannot know where you're from unless you get to know who you are. Ladies and gentlemen, there was an old story told of a man who went hunting, and after a very long toil and a very busy day of hustle, the evening came without him having anything to point to as a result of what he has been doing through the whole day. As for those who could have tried hunting or even tried activities related to forest and activities related to hunting, or even having good moments where forest could be, you might be understanding what I'm talking of exactly. With such an experience, you and your colleagues gets to end the day without notifying the reason for why you have gone into the forest for hunting. And as they went back, this old man became frustrated and started wondering what he will have to show to the people who are left at home. And what he decides, he first decides to buy time. And afterwards, as he got out of the forest, he suddenly landed upon some strange egg. And those eggs were an egg of a bird that was unknown to him. What he had to do is that he collected those eggs and went back with it at home to act as a reference and evidence of what exactly was doing through the entire day. But one thing also stepped his mind. He said, I want to breed and see which type of bird is this. So he had to replace the eggs of some birds which were laying at home. And after some fortnight ahead, the bird ended up hatching this unknown egg. And as these birds grew together with the other fellow of the other birds, time came that the picture and the real fact about what this bird was started appearing. To cut the story short and to give you the moral directly, it's that after some time, this bird, which were from the unknown bird, unveiled itself and figured out its identity. But the strange thing about this bird also was that they themselves discovered and understood that where they were was not the right place for them to be. They later discovered that they don't belong to that community, but they belong to a different community. After a short while, when they had the potential to start flying, meaning the birds which were produced from the egg that was unknown, the egg that was picked by this man while on his way back home from hunting, those same birds discovered the identity and they flew and ran away from this society. More of the story is that in life, we reach a point that we discover that we are tired of settling for less. We get to discover the potential in us. We get to discover the full identity and the full energy in us. And so we reach a point that we say stop to all the mediocre mentalities. We give a stop to all the habits that stops us from getting to the level we want to get. And that was the exact fact with the society that came after the previous society we have spoken about. this society called the Industrial Society, which historian points to it that it began way back in 1765, according to history. It was from this society that engines were used to manufacture products. They were used and converted into energies. It was from this society that innovation like the windmill and the water wheel that produced and generated power were developed. And it was from this moment that humanity started having an ease to production, because the energy needed to produce a particular product did not depend on animal alone, but it depended on the cooperation between the human and also the machine, though it entirely needed and depended on the effort of human or animal power. But this generation became a tremendous turning point of life. And a product that was produced by either fuel or electricity ended up also becoming a transformational point of life, adding up more surplus to the economy of a particular location, and it gave new room towards more inequity. It was from this moment that others became even bigger and more better in accumulating things, whereas the others still who were not capable to survive as the fittest were thrown out of the production chain. Ladies and gentlemen, it was from this society that a change of mindset started coming in. In other words, the fact about this society is that it gave a new push towards inequity, and many left their location in search for greener pasture and in search for a better life. It was from this point that many left their rural locations to move to the urban areas in order for them to rewrite their destiny, in order for them to unleash their full potential, and in order for them to get a strive for what they needed to succeed in. As I earlier stated from the story of the bird, that life can only get changed when we discover where we need to change from. If the birds discovered who they were and still decided to settle at that particular area, they would not end up becoming the birds that they needed to be. Yes, they would be still birds, but they will not have the unique character that is attached to such a bird like them. And with this society we are speaking of, that required many individuals to relocate from their society to another society in order for them to push and press on with life. The bitter truth is that through the change of their locations, they experience hardship of life. They experience harsh working conditions, but they still pressed on. The many who survived as the fittest became the great people of the world, whereas those who gave up along the way ended up remaining average. But as they continued pressing on with the different challenges, soon and later on, some policies were developed. Inequity was revised, and from here, this society gave everyone equal opportunities and equal rights. They started owning homes. They started yearning for their rights, and they got what they deserved as their rights. They became workers who lived a particular standard of life. They started having the health needed for them. and they started benefiting from what the world has gotten for them. Those people who carried on with their ambitions of life and never giving up or never being scared by what was being experienced through the hardship of changing life, just like it happened one of these days. It is not easy changing a life. It is hard transforming who you are. It is hard continuing when you've reached the other side of the rainbow. But with continued persistence, life gets to be defined in a different way. For that is what life is all about. But ladies and gentlemen, with this society, more systems were created, like the political systems, that many were becoming representatives. Many gained social status. Many got their equal rights. The women were also given their opportunities. The minorities of the societies became the great people as well. Rights to vote were given. Citizen ownership became one of the principles of life as well, and so forth. The internet and many of the benefits that came in all transformed and changed the society that we are speaking of, which is called the industrial society. It is where the turning point, the mega turning point of life that ushered us into a society that is so grateful, a society that we are still living in up to date, and a society that is filled with tremendous potentials and capabilities, filled with opportunities needed for one to move on, and filled with information that is within reach at a free cost. And ladies and gentlemen, before we get into the next society that historically happened and gave a mega shift to the current definition of life, we first have to ponder this question. The question is, what makes life feel grateful for you? What makes you have what life means? And what are some of the things that you feel so grateful whenever you've done? Ladies and gentlemen, as we reach the tail end of our today's podcast, allow us inform you of the society that is a reason for our current generation. Remember, today's edition is to reveal a tale of how everything changed and the transformations that happened in the world history. And for today's podcast, it is helping us to know the history, but it's also helping us to use the same facts of the history to reflect on our current present. And it is from the history and the current present that will help us also predict and shape what the future looks like. It is within this pattern. And as we reach the tail end of today's podcast, allow me introduce for you a society that holds the reason for why you're listening to this podcast from wherever you're tuning in from and from wherever you're listening to it from. It is from this type of society that has led to access to information, browsing of internet, and abundance opportunities of life. It is from this society that we are seeing electric gadgets almost within reach of everyone. And this society is called the post-industrial society, that is commonly known as the information age society. As someone one time stated, that it is a society that defines what the 21st century means. And ladies and gentlemen, the primary source of this society we are talking of, that we still exist in up to date, is a society that primarily changed and developed different things. And the primary source of the changes here are the development of technological aspect and being centered on microchip. It is often referred to as information society, as I earlier stated for you. And some of its characteristics is that it is not about turning raw materials into products, but rather transforming information known and passing those information, knowledge, skills, specialization, and showcasing of expertise ideas to being passed in different contexts to the many people from around the globe. It's a global village where information and passing of knowledge has turned into a trade that one is able to pay for or sell his or her understanding or showcasing of his knowledge and expertise skills, as well as the ideology of certain things he or she knows to others at a cost and in a way that is monetized. Some of the characteristics of this society we are speaking of is that in the previous societies we spoke of, individuals did not produce anything, but now we transmit or apply the information to provide a service that others are willing to pay for. So this is one characteristic of a society like this. The other characteristic of a society like this is that service industries like banking, consulting companies and training companies, education departments, entertainment world, the health, government, insurance, the law, the media, research, sales, and more, to mention but a few. All those sectors rely on information, and it does employ those with information in order for them to provide a service that others are willing to pay for. Ladies and gentlemen, the other aspect of this society is that it has made technological advance in different ways that we behave and trade today, in that one can scan at a product and give a direct payment to the company, which does not require a chain of banking system. In this society we are speaking of, it has turned communication upside down, where things are made simpler and easier to be experienced, where you sit from wherever your location and still join the world in education and joining a class from a diaspora. It is a society that all you need is browsing and an internet device, and it can give you access and links you to any part of the world. But the fact with this society is that all the transformations we currently observe and have uprooted our old perspective, and it is replacing them with a new one. Renote this again. With all those transformations we looked at, and with the other earlier illustration I gave for you, I need you to imagine yourself being in all those societies to the current society we are speaking of, in that how you perceive things has been replaced simply because of the society you're living in and the era you are living in, or the type of society that you're existing in. As I earlier stated, that you are a direct product of the society. You are directly an ideology of the people you hang around with. And with this society we are speaking of, it is a society that gives us tremendous connections to the other side of the world. But get to note that we have also reached a point where we are overloaded by information. Many people are so confused on what to do next. simply because they're filled with more information. They're overloaded with information beyond what they needed. And any information being consumed now must directly become a product of your own conclusion. For if you cannot filter an information or different informations, you are likely to be controlled by some others who have different motives in life. In other words, with all the information you're getting to know and all the access to the information you have, one must be able to filter out what he or she needs to consume. Because if you don't have that differentiator, if you don't have that filter, you are going to be dragged into a side of the world that you are not supposed to be in. In other words, everyone is chasing after their own agendas, not yours. So this means that your time and your resources shall be consumed by those whose aspirations and desires and egos are higher than yours or greater than yours. And the fact about this society is that there is no stone being left unturned. Every stone is being turned upside down. In other words, everything is being monetized. You hear of copyrights here and there. You hear of conditions. You hear of subscription fee. Every content the world is producing currently carries a cost. It's either you making money from it or others making money from it, or it's either you spending money while the others are gaining. So with this society we are speaking of, it is being monetized in all levels and all aspects. As the matter of the fact, the content or this podcast you're listening right now has a monetary fund to it. It's either you making money from it or someone else making money from it. And that is the bitter fact. That is a bitter truth that most people may not tell you. In fact, you cannot learn of it even from Harvard's university. Those are the things that will never be taught to you while in any institution of your country. So ladies and gentlemen, what next then when life has reached up to this point? From the first generation or the first society to almost the last society that we have already spoken over. What next then? There is a society coming after this. Life will still continue. Others will still continue developing. You will live and reach a point where you will end your life too. But others will carry on with the world. And one of the emerging society that you need to also know as we conclude our podcast today is a society that is dubbed as the biotech society. After the information age society, we are going to directly be into a shift. In other words, we are already into a shift, just like a DJ that plays the next song without you realizing the previous song. You just jump into a beat, you just jump into a same vibe, and you don't know where the interpode were. You don't know where the interlude of what changed that song could be. And that is the shift we are into right now. We are heading into a biotech society where technology controls biology as well as biology is controlling technology. We are hearing of electric cars, something which was not existing in the previous society. We are hearing of robotics, and others are getting scared that perhaps they might likely lose their job because a report states that by 2050, almost 50% of the jobs shall get lost of the job market because the robotics will be taking over. Talk of surveillance Right now, one does not need to know what exactly is happening from the other side of the corner. They just have to sit and relax because the technology is doing its part. And right now, a lot of things are being developed, from what can prevent pregnancy to what can expand your life ages, to how you can change, to the medicines, to a lot of different aspects. Here is where we are heading, and we are to that mega shift already. The biotech society. As someone one time stated, that we are into a doom's clock, where if there is no truth, there will be no fact. And where there is no fact and there is no truth, there will definitely be no trust. We are reaching to that point that we shall no longer trust human words, but trust robotics, or perhaps perceive the world in a different way than what others used to perceive in the previous generations that passed. As others are worried that perhaps their jobs shall be taken away by robotics, there is also something we need to redefine when it comes to this society, the merits of what a society like this will have to bring for us. According to the shift that kept happening within every block of society that we have discovered today, get to know that a general conclusion could be this way. As transformation happens, as society shifted from one era to the other era, so they did even change our ways that we think about self and how we think about life. And in each and every society, there is a boundary which is always set. There is always a fence that is either keeping you in or keeping you out of every aspect of life. And the society you exist in could be the reason for what you are right now and for who you are right now. It is still the same society you're living in that has the key and the password to becoming that person you need to be. For us, it is a fence for life. Our status, our roles, our institutions, and all the aspect all lies within the members of our society. Every decision taken affects directly you, and every society as it is transformed gave tremendous insight of what life could be. For they established the way they had to prevail, the way they had to believe, and the way they had to behave. And it was a determining factor. And it brought to stage the different aspect of interpretation and how to perceive things. In other words, it brought in different ways the iniquities of life, and it set a stage for relationship between men and women. It created a distance between the ethical and ethical aspect. It is the society that we exist in that gives us the orientation of what we should do in life and at which age must we do it. For it holds the reason and a differentiator for who is poor and who is rich. It is from those societies that we live in that gets to give us those orientations of life, the principles of life, and the way we must think around life. As we conclude today's podcast, we need to ask ourselves this question. Do you think someone who lived in the past era of society, which is the hunting and gathering society, would think and behave or act or interpret things the same way like you do in this post-industrial society or the information age? Or do you think the one who lived during the pastoral or the agricultural era, do you think he or she will behave, think, and approach life the way someone who is going to live in the biotech generation will live? Anyway, it's a question that you first have to answer on your own. But this is the answer. The truth is that they would not feel the same way about life. Their beliefs will not be the same, and they will not hold the same aspiration of life. Your aspect of life would not be the same, for your attitudes and views are only based on the society you live in and the era that you're living in. So where are you right now currently? Are you having the mindset that is coordinative to the era you're living in? Or you're living in a particular era but still having the mindset of the previous era of life? Remember, you are a product of your own decision. It doesn't matter your locations in life. It doesn't matter what you do in life. It doesn't matter who owns your country's debts. It doesn't matter the type of leadership in your country's government. It doesn't matter the policies around tax. It doesn't matter about the changes of weather and climate. What matters is about you. For everything you are is directly a product of your own decision. So decide wisely. We are writing time to conclude our today's podcast. I must say it has been a palm-pleasing pleasure having you from that moment we started until this very moment. Re-listen to this via our YouTube channel, the Ep4 Podcast 256, and follow me from my different social handles for more updates. On LinkedIn at Joshua Oyepa, Instagram at Joshua Oyepa, Facebook at Joshua Oyepa, X at Joshua Oyepa, and other platforms. Get to subscribe to our YouTube channel for unstoppable contents and truth beyond what you know, plus truth on addition to what you know.